Good morning, Trinity family. So glad you're joining us this morning. I got a special treat for us. I've got our friend Paul, who's been teaching for the past several weeks, here with us just to do a little Q&A. You guys had some great questions that came this way, and so I thought, what a great day to bring Paul out to the cemetery and do a little talking about death, your favorite subject, right?
Exactly.
So Paul, as you know, he's a member of the church. Tell us just quickly a little bit about yourself and what got you interested in this subject on death.
Well, I work with a woman by the name of Helen Whitney, who is a great filmmaker, and she directed this series. She wrote it, and I was kind of involved from the very beginning in helping her with this, and so it was just it was a real interest. We've done documentaries on forgiveness and other kind of spiritual issues,
right.
But we wanted to talk about things that most people don't like to talk about, and death is right up there.
I would say so. There's all kinds of questions that people tend to have when they think about death. Some people want to talk about it, some people don't want to talk about it. Some people deny it, some people own up to it. As you've experienced, what has been the biggest question as it relates to your series, as it relates to those type things?
Well, we tried to, Helen tried to talk to people who were, some of them were just in denial. Some of them, were fighting death tooth and nail, like they were going to win. And then there were those who seemed to be the most at peace, who embraced it, usually after a period of denial. It's kind of like the stages of mourning. And that is a large thing. Also, I think, there's a cultural difference, especially in the United States, in our thinking about death. We don't. We're mainly in denial until we're forced to think about this. And, in other cultures, people meditate on death. Several decades ago, I went down to Antigua, Guatemala during Semana Santa, which is Holy Week. And every night there are reenactments of the Passion of the Christ and the scourging and the crown of thorns. And it all culminates on Good Friday with the crucifixion. And then I was surprised on Sunday morning, Easter Sunday, I went and there was nobody there. The churches were empty. In Latin America, especially among the poor and people like that, they really get the suffering of Christ. They get the sorrow, they get the passion of Christ, but they completely missed out on the resurrection. But just the opposite is true of America, where our churches are completely empty on Good Friday, and you can't get a seat on Sunday, and it's because of our kind of positive thinking culture. You look at the books. I mean, a lot of people like books like The Secret, and they've read Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking. And even those people who meditate on a regular basis, they're always meditating on the light and kind of good things, and right. They rarely meditate on their own death.
Yeah, it's not a Western type concept. Luther coined the term theology of the cross versus theology of glory. And his whole idea was that Jesus was not on this trajectory of glory, getting better and better and better. In fact, his life got a lot worse. And he kind of has this new theological term called the theology of the cross, which is the downward trajectory. And if we're honest as Christians, that's really our life. It was the life of the apostles and the disciples and that kind of thing. Why do you think it is that Westerners, Americans, since we're Americans, they don't want to think about death? They want to think more about glory. What is it that's in them that makes them think?
Again, it's part of it is denial, and part of it is just who we are, always trying to look on the bright side of life. And in the end, there's death, the descent into hell, and the resurrection. you got to have everything in order to be a wholly balanced person, and all of that's got to be reflected. There was a philosopher, a very famous philosopher by the name of Martin Heidegger, and I thought he had it kind of best. He believed that in order to be an authentic person, someone who was leading an absolute life of freedom and creativity, that in order to do that, you had to meditate on your own death every single day. And the purpose of the meditation was to kind of complete everything that was incomplete in your life. So you ask yourself, who do I love who I haven't told I love you? Who do I need to ask for forgiveness who I haven't asked for forgiveness? Who do I need to forgive that I haven't forgiven? And when all those things, when nothing is left undone, and you're kind of ready to be taken away and die, that moment you walk out in the street, and if you're hit by a bus, okay, but if you're not, you can do anything. I mean, everything is open to you because nothing is holding you back, because there's nothing incomplete in your life. And so he kind of had, I think, that balance of death and the resurrection all in one by making sure that it was all inside of you.
Yeah, that is so good. It really plays into who we are as Episcopalians, especially during Lent, when we begin our services with the great litany of love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And then we have this great time where we pause and we confess those areas where we haven't done it. And then what I love the most is corporately we have this confessional where we actually say, Lord, forgive the things that I've done and the things that I have left undone. And in a way, you leave those services feeling like, I've addressed these things. Now, maybe you haven't addressed it one-on-one with humanity, but you've at least addressed it in your own heart of, there's things I've done in this life that I don't even remember, but they were wrong, and I want to acknowledge that. And then it sets you free, right? When the skeletons are out of the closet, you have nothing else to be afraid of.
That's the key. And when you have nothing else to be afraid of, that's when you can walk out into life, what Heidegger called the clearing, and everything is available to you. They're just your boundaries, expand as to what's possible in your life because of that.
I love it. That's actually really beautiful. Well, what would you say to the person that's watching today? They've got angst with death. Perhaps they've lost a loved one this year with COVID. Perhaps they have a disease that they're dying of themselves, and they've got this real angst. Where would you point them for hope?
As we said, there's really only two choices. You can fight it, or you can embrace it. And fighting, nobody's ever gotten out of this world alive. So the question is, how do you embrace it? And again, I go back to Heidegger. It's making sure that nothing is incomplete. All the people that you love, you gotta express that and embrace that. And all the things that, bad things, you need to just clear that up. And really, there's a concept in Buddhism which I've always liked. The highest, it's generally considered in Buddhism the highest spiritual point you can get to, and it's called the joyful embrace of the sorrows of the world. And there's nothing more sorrowful than death, and especially your own death, second only to the people you love dying. And so the paradox is the joyful embrace, and I emphasize joyful embrace, not bitter, kicking and screaming
Yep.
embrace, but the joyful embrace of your coming death. And it's just a natural part of life, and you really only have one choice. But this is where the spirituality comes from, at least in Buddhism,
Right.
is this joyful embrace of the sorrows of the world.
Absolutely. It's almost, I hear you saying, when we live life like this, where we're able to give and receive rather than like this, the clenched fist of you can't give or receive, and it locks you up. It's not really locking up the people around you. You're the one locked up. But if we can learn to kind of open up and forgive those things that we need to forgive and receive forgiveness where we need to and give love and show love, wow, what a better world this would be if we could live that way. It somewhat takes the sting out of death, because that's what Jesus actually did for us perfectly. That's what Easter morning's all about, is he freely gave with nothing in return. He just freely gave. And wow, as Christians, that's where we find our hope.
It's called redemption and resurrection.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful thing. Well, let me ask you this, if I can change gears right quick on you. Any projects you're working on right now that you're excited about or that we can look forward to coming down the pipe?
We are, my firm, my little television production company is working on a future PBS series on love, but in a large context, and I think it's going to be really good.
Wonderful.
I'm also working on a new book on my interviews and conversations with the Dalai Lama that I've made over a period of years, and I'm co-writing that book with another person, and I'm hoping that will come out either late this year or early next year.
Fantastic. I can't wait to see it. Well, thank you so much for giving of your time for us these past several weeks while we make our Lenten journey, a season when that's what we're thinking about is death, with the hope that the resurrection's on the other end, and it is. We got a little special 15-minute something for you here on the back end of this. Paul gave us some extra footage, and so I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to let you watch it, and then we'll meet back on the back end for a quick closing prayer.
For those of us dying outside the fold of religious consolation, the solace of art and love can become the story.
Less than 3 years ago, my two best friends died within 4 days of each other. Two relatively healthy men, not showing signs of dying really. And then, bingo, they were gone in the breath of 4 days. These two vital men, intellectual companions, long-term playmates, the buddies I swam with and traveled with, and they were gone. They had talked about, things they were going to do next year. We all say, next year we'll do this. Well, there is no next year, and their deaths pointed out to Maggie and me that there is no time like the present.
They were two people who had kept saying that they wanted to do this thing. They wanted to go live in Europe, and they never did it. And then one of those partners was left behind not only with the sorrow of loss, but also with the regret of not having done the thing that they had said they were going to do together. Their deaths taught us hard lessons that we hadn't been prepared to take. Dear Murray probably informed us more about death than about living, because his death was a drawn-out, painful death, surrounded by denial, understandably. We could see that he was dying. He knew that he was dying, and he wanted out. Easy for us to want to help him. Not so easy for his family to ease him out of the life.
Murray and I, when we would leave Cape Cod at the end of every summer, we'd meet and we would say, it's time to go. And we would pack up with cars. Summer was over, pull the shade down, go. Murray was in the hospital. I brought him a photograph. A simple building with a doorway looking out to the sea. I put it on the wall at the foot of Murray's bed. And we both knew that he was dying. And I whispered in his ear, it's time to go, Murray. I said, there's the door. He thanked me for that. It was his escape route. Out, into that sunlight. Yeah, time to go.
Joel and I had a lot of conversations after that about how we would stand by each other. If one of us is diagnosed with a serious illness that we know will take us out, neither of us want to suffer that way. And not the next hospital procedure and the next tube and the next thing and the intubation and the... No, thank you. So that death was profound.
Their deaths propelled us to reconsider the way we were living. For example, letting go of ambition.
I met Joel on Cape Cod. He was this joyful spirit at play. And then when I moved to New York with him, I saw, I don't want to say a completely different person, but I saw certainly a different facet of this man. I saw the New Yorker. I saw the person who was driven to achieve. And I tapped into that energy. I wanted to be a successful published writer. I wanted to stake my claim. I wanted to be seen. And life became all about tomorrow, next year. And it was also about the material. A bigger apartment, another pair of shoes.
Yet another book, another show in a museum, or another, body of work. And instead of climbing that internal ladder, to kind of jump off it into free fall. Maggie said, let's sell the house on the Cape. Let's pay off all our debts. And we just packed it all in and moved to Tuscany.
To be in a country that has all the echo of time in every moment carries a kind of immortality with it. The weight of history feels present in every day.
This is a little town in Tuscany that's basically unoccupied. And the two of us would stretch out on this little bench and fall asleep in each other's arms underneath the dripping of the flowers and the bee sounds.
Our new life there is a comfort that has entered the mystery of us approaching our death. It's just eased some element of terror that we were here and then we weren't, and what did it all mean?
This way so I could have some of that
lifted up.
Somehow these deaths and the change of life we were about to make and the ideas that were percolating in the background had a moment of revelation for me. I felt this urge to connect to a body of work that I knew from the history of art, but I had never really dealt with myself, and that was the still life. I collect things now that have once had a life and were cast off, and they're basically in the junk pile. And by rescuing this one and that one and bringing them back and putting them on this little teatrino, little theatrical setting that I've made, these characters come onto the stage, and one more time they have a chance to express themselves.
Perhaps he's choosing old objects as a way of honoring his age. I see a conversation between him and these objects. He understands them. And these objects have been ignored for a long time, most of them, and he's finding them and he's bringing them back to life for a small moment, placing them in his little theater, taking this one and putting it next to it and saying, okay, have a conversation. He's playing with death and making it live. And how much of this is just pure play and adventure for him, and how much of it is him facing his own death and finding a way to his immortality, that maybe he won't be left on a shelf somewhere, that maybe his work will always be rediscovered, and in that way he'll live on. I think that's a big piece for Joel.
I'm really here in this phase of my life for the last look. It's like saying goodbye to everything, one thing at a time. Hold it up, lick it with consciousness, turn it around, thrill to its ordinary beauty, move it off stage, bring on the next. Am I afraid of death at this point in my life? No, it's coming at me, and I've been lucky in experiencing a vision of what death was about probably 30 years ago. I took an LSD trip with Murray on Cape Cod, and during the course of that trip, we found ourselves lying on the grass of the house that I had rented, baking in the sun. And I noticed in the grass all kinds of creatures moving around. And I remember turning to Murray on my belly and saying, put your hands in the earth and open it up. Let's see what's in there. And we sort of dug our fingers in and pulled the earth back, opening up this womb, in a way. It was teeming with life. It was fecund. And I remember peering into it and thinking, oh, that's what comes after. It doesn't stop. It is just an incredible enrichment that we become part of that whole thing, that there is no end. There is no end to the end. I thought, there's nothing to be afraid of. And that experience, like an arrow, right through my entire life, has been buoyant in a way for me. I never can think of death with any kind of tragic motif, dark, abyss of nothingness.
I had much more fear of death until quite recently, when that feeling would come up in me of, no, I don't want to die. It was because I felt that I hadn't fully inhabited my own life.
It's hot still, huh?
Yeah, the light's beautiful.
Now I feel the warmth of having no regret. That Joel and I have finally done the thing that we were saying we always wanted to do.
And we are really looking at who we are as individuals and with each other. It's as if the last look not only applies to the cast-off objects, it applies to each other. And I want to know what it's like to be completely intimate with somebody before I die. Maggie turned to me at one point and said, if I die now, I will at least have had this year with you.
Wow, what a great series this was. I hope you have a great week. I look forward to seeing you next week. Let me say a quick prayer for you today. Lord Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you for being our hope. Thank you for allowing us to take some time during the season of Lent to think about death and what that really means. Lord, I pray that our hearts and our minds and our souls will be prepared and excited about Easter morning. In Jesus' name, amen.